Al Jazeera Podcasts.
Today, a country at war becomes a booming baby industry.
Some of them are using surrogacy to get money because the situation with the war and with the men in the front line is very precarious.
How Ukraine has become Europe's surrogacy hub, even in the face of bombs. I'm Natasha del Toro, and this is The Take. Attitudes around surrogacy are pretty different in Europe than they are in the US, where I'm based. Surrogacy is widely considered a viable reproductive option for people who can afford it in the US. But in Europe, it's a lot more controversial.
I would not carry someone else's baby, and for that same reason, I would not pay someone to carry mine.
People who do surrogacy tend to be lower income women, so it might set a precedent where women are kind of used as these baby factories.
But there is a place in Europe that has become an international surrogacy hub, Ukraine. It became this way because of a mix of lax regulations and cost. But what happened to that industry after Russia invaded Ukraine?
I'm Patricia Simón. I'm a Spanish journalist. And today we are going to speak about an investigation that a team of journalists, European journalists, we have done in 4 countries: Ukraine, Georgia, Spain, and Greece.
Patricia, I'm so excited to have you here. I understand that you spent a lot of time reporting on Ukraine's surrogacy industry as part of this investigation for the Spanish magazine La Marea, which was recently published. Most of Europe bans for-profit surrogacy out of ethical, legal, and human rights concerns focusing on the protection of women and children.
In France, surrogacy has been banned since 1994. It's written in the Civil Code, and Emmanuel Macron recently reiterated that he is still not in favor of it.
Contrary to most of the European Union, surrogate motherhood is allowed in Greece, but it remains an exception, and it's not meant to be a business model.
So, Patricia, you were on the ground in Ukraine. How does it work there?
Well, it's interesting because I began investigating surrogacy in Ukraine when I was covering the beginning of the war in 2022. At that moment, we knew that Ukraine is the main surrogacy hub in Europe, as you said. The business began to grow really fast, quickly, due to the low prices for a baby that are between $40,000 and $70,000. For example, in United States, the process cost more than $100,000. And it grew up very quickly because legislation is very lax. We find that these companies used to arrange fake marriage and fake documents about the affiliation between the babies and the intended parents. We have found that many of these companies practice tax evasion through tax havens, and that they are not controlled by the institutions.
Did you hear or experience any of the war that was happening there?
Well, the first time that I reported was during the beginning of the war, and it was like Kyiv was going to be under Russian control in the next days. We were invited to visit a bunker full of babies that were waiting for the intended parents. And it was interesting because the Ukrainian government invited international reporters to visit this clinic because it's so normalized in Ukraine, the surrogacy, that they thought if we show the babies to the rest of the world, the empathy, because there is nothing more beautiful than babies. And I realized that, we were trying to be manipulated. So they thought international solidarity was going to be easier and they were going to be more supported.
That's incredible that you had the chance, you experienced that and saw firsthand. How has this industry been adapting to war?
This is one of the most interesting findings of our investigation, how surrogacy companies have adapted to the context of war, not only to maintain their business, but to increase it. One of the visits to one of the clinics that is in Kharkiv, that is really close to the Russian border, while I was reporting and visiting this clinic, it was bombed, and that happens at least twice per week. And that is one of the reasons that this company has moved business to the capital, to Kyiv, and they have expanded their services. They offer that the couples, the intended parents, can send their genetic material by postal mail to Ukraine, or the childbirths can take place in other countries like Greece or Georgia, which is absolutely illegal for the Ukrainian legislation. But this way, the intended parents do not have to go to a country at war. Another point is that they don't have enough women to get pregnant because of the exodus of women caused by the Russian invasion. So they are recruiting poor women from nearby former Soviet republics and also opening delegations in other countries like Georgia and Greece, that is inside the European Union.
It's so surprising to me to learn that Ukraine is a place where this industry is booming. It kind of defies logic, especially considering that it has been experiencing heavy bombing. You've spoken to several of the women who've carried babies that weren't their own. What are their lives like, and what does surrogacy mean for them?
Well, I have interviewed several women, as you said, and all the testimonies have many aspects in common. For example, all of them explain that during the attempts to get pregnant, they have to inject themselves an enormous amount of hormones to try to make the embryos succeed. Often they have to pay for this treatment themselves. They used to repeat that they do not usually explain anything to them, that they only speak between the doctors and the nurse, and that they are denied any decision-making capacity. Also, if the fetus has any health problem, only the intended parents will have the possibility to decide if they continue with the pregnancy or not. And surrogate mothers are often forced to live during the last 2 months of the pregnancy in an apartment with other pregnant women, perhaps 3 or 4 in the same room, without privacy, without being able to decide anything, who they meet, what are they going to eat, or anything. Most of the women who are surrogating during these last years with the war, they are transferred to the west area of Ukraine. We have to remember that in Ukraine, you only can surrogate if you have your own children. So imagine that most of them are separated of their own children. They have to live in a place they don't know, and they are, suffering because they don't know if their own family is safe. But the truth is that all the women that I have interviewed, all they say, I need the money. This money that is more or less between $8,000 or $10,000 if they have twins. For me, give me the possibility to buy a house, to give a better education to my children. So probably I will do it again. And now with the war, with more of them in a war situation, so it's better for the industry because they are going to pay less.
They pay less sorry, could you explain that part again? That seems like a key point there. They pay less when the war is going on?
In some of the companies, they are paying less because, for example, some of these companies has open delegations in another countries, like in Georgia. So if you are in a rural area in danger of occupation by the Russian army. They are offering them $7,000, $8,000, like the best offer. And before the war, they were $10,000, $12,000. For them, is a huge difference. So some companies are taking advantage of the context of war to offer lower prices to these women.
Oh my gosh. Wow. That really speaks to the level of desperation that these women are in. And again, I mean, it's just hard for me to imagine that this is also happening in the context of war. It can't be safe for the mother or for the babies to be in this situation when there are literal bombings happening outside. Now, of course, the companies offering these services, there's a company called Veskov in Ukraine, told you that they take into account women's rights, ensuring that being a surrogate is safe. Is that what you've seen in Ukraine?
No, not at all.
So, Patricia, can you maybe put some faces to this story?
Yeah. One of them is Victoria. Victoria is a woman who 5 years ago could not even pay the rent for the room where she lived with her 1-year-old son. Her son also has a disability, a health problem, so she decided to be a surrogate mother. And she tried to get pregnant 3 times before finally she got pregnant with twins. But the intended couple only wanted one baby, so she had to abort one of them. She said that she asked to the nurse if she could see the baby. She said that it was not possible.
When I was already in the ward and the child was lying next to me, since I couldn't move, I was motionless. I asked the nurse for her phone and asked to take a picture of him. He was lying in a bassinet, and I asked to take a picture of him. That's how I saw him.
And after this process, she had another baby with her husband, and she was born with Down syndrome. So now she's in a very, very precarious situation. She lives in the outskirts of Kiev, and she said to me, it was very hard, but if I could do it again for my babies, I will do it.
Wow. Oh my gosh. What a story.
Yeah.
That's really hard to hear.
Yeah, I remember another case. She's Marina.
I didn't like it. They don't give you full information, and the doctors talk to you like you're trash. Another trash. Yes, it's uncomfortable. In general, the attitude is not very good.
She lived in the outskirts of Kiev. She was very poor. She had a 2-year-old girl. She had not a husband, and she decided first to be an egg donor and after to be a surrogate mother, and she got pregnant.
This clinic promised psychological help, but no one offered it.
All the companies offer psychological support after the childbirth, but they never really give it to the surrogate.
They're putting themselves through so much. When these companies violate the terms, do these women have any ability to complain or to take them to court? Is there any recourse?
One of the problems is that they sign contracts that sometimes are written in English for the foreign families' intended parents. So they don't really understand what they are signing. And sometimes they think they are going to receive $10,000 and after they receive only $8,000 and they can't complain. These women have not the possibility to contract a lawyer because they don't have the abilities and the money. They don't want to spend money. And because with the war context, most of the people are in a survival way of life, so it's not possible
Did you notice if these women had experienced any sort of mental health problems as a result of being a part of this?
Well, it's difficult to identify what is the impact of surrogacy, what is the impact of war, and the poverty that the war has made more severe. Most of them, when they speak about this, they are very strong women, but most of them, they feel really sad, not only because of the separation of the babies, but because for some of them it's an embarrassing situation.
Wow. Out of my own curiosity, did any of these women have husbands who had gone to war and whose husbands had died or were disabled or were injured? I mean, what kind of other impacts did you see from the war on these women's lives?
One of the impacts of the war is that as men has to go to the war and become soldiers, they receive very low salaries. So some of them are using surrogacy to get money because the situation with the war and with the men in the front line is very precarious. Another point is that to sign a contract as a surrogate mother, you need the permit of your husband. So some human rights organizations share their concerns that sometimes they are forced by their husband to do this. And some of them became widows because of the war. So now they don't have a salary that the men brought to the home. So they use surrogacy because of this.
Oh my gosh, that's another point that the women are turning to surrogacy because they don't have a second income. Maybe we could leave on a note where you talk about what, for these women, particularly in Ukraine, who have experienced war and who are particularly vulnerable, what are your thoughts about surrogacy, having a surrogacy hub in the middle of that kind of conflict?
I fully respect the desire to be mother and father, and has to be really, really difficult to be not able to do it. The point is how desire has become right. But the European Parliament says that surrogacy is exploitation of women and commercialization of baby, exploitation of they both. We find media manipulation sometimes because the lobby in Europe is very strong that is trying to manipulate the public opinion to normalize surrogacy. And the most important, we find that the institutions are not working. So all these companies are out of the control. I will never judge the women, the surrogate women, because all of them has really, really serious needs, and all of them do it for their own children. So all my respect.
And that's The Take. This episode was produced by Marcos Bartolomé, Melanie Marich, Hanah Shokeir, Remas Alhawari, Ashish Malhotra, and me, Natasha del Toro. It was edited by Alexandra Locke. Our sound designer is Alex Roldan. Our video editors are Hisham Abu Salah and Mohannad Al-Melhem. Alexandra Locke is The Take's executive producer. Ney Alvarez is Al Jazeera's head of audio. We'll be back tomorrow.